Hello and welcome. I am Deji Badimosi. Academic activities in public universities in the country have been shut down since February 14th, making it exactly 157 days that the university lecturers withdrew their services over what they termed as continuous neglect and gross insincerity from the federal government. Now, apart from demanding better welfare conditions and improved university funding, the unions now have accused the federal government of reneging now on previous agreements with them. It started as a warning strike, but since that time, the federal government has not shifted grounds, and the lecturers are also not budging, arguing that the strike is in the best interest of the education sector in the long run. Now, wading into the crisis, President Muhammadu Buhari has now asked the Minister of Education, Adamu, to take over the negotiation, and the minister, of course, has promised that he should be able to resolve the issue within the next 2 weeks. Now, the president gave the directive during a meeting with the minister and the relevant agencies after he summoned them to receive a briefing on why schools have been closed for so long. Now, apart from the instructions given to the education minister, the president also directed the Minister of Labour and Employment, Chris Gige, as well as the secretary to the government of the Federation, Boss Mustafa, to be in attendance at meetings to resolve the crisis in due time. Although some people have described the situation as a national embarrassment, Asuu continues to insist that it will not back down until their demands are met. Joining me to discuss this further now is the president of Asuu, Professor Emmanuel Osadeke. Prof, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Where exactly are we as far as negotiation between your union and the government is concerned?
Well, I want to say it again. We have completed negotiations with the government team, a team they set up headed by Professor Nimi Briggs, Emeritus Professor Nimi Briggs, who told us they have the mandate of the government to negotiate. And we met a number of times, and both sides making their presentation. At the end, we arrived at a consensus and came up with a draft pre-negotiated agreement. And that was on the 16th of June. They requested I want to go and get the principal, which is the government, to give the permission to sign. While we also decided to go to meet our member to give us permission to sign. That was 16th of June. We didn't expect that to last more than 3 or 4 days, but it's a month and a week now, a month and 2 weeks.
Well, even after
a month and a week.
Well, there's no question at all. I mean, we know that the government has raised issues with the Nimi Briggs report, but let me ask you this. Other than the issue of UTAS or IPs, whatever it is, and your request for revitalization fund now for universities, as well as a backlog now, your welfare generally speaking now, is there any other issue that is the sticking point for now?
Well, let me also correct the impression. Government have not reacted to our negotiated agreement. They've not. You see, in a good negotiation, collective bargaining, if both sides go to their principal, if they have issue, they invite the other body to come to look at the issues and resolve it, not going to the press. So as far as concerned, what's in the press is not part of what we negotiated, because it's against all the rule of collective bargaining. And nobody has owned up as the person who offloaded that so-called information into the public. That is not the rule. When we finish, the document becomes public. But when we are negotiating between us, if you have issue, you come back. If we have issue, we call them. But what they have done shows that if it is true that what they put on air is from the government, we show that they have breached the rule of negotiation. And that's one of the issues. Other issues that are there are, one, apart from the one you talked about, the issue of revitalization fund, issue of academic allowance, arrears, the issue of UTAS, which they challenge us to do and we have done, to replace the IPs that from all education is riddled with corruption. There is still issue of decision panel to universities, which is sort of an issue we talked about. And a team was set as far back as February 2021. Until now, the report is not out. After more than 18 months, the report is still not out. That is one of the issues that is there. So that if there are people who have swindled the government money in the university, or who have done what is not correct, they will be punished. And those who have done well will be applauded and asked them to go in that way. But you don't need money to do that. The report is sent out. We also have this issue of this proliferation of universities. You now have University of Transportation, University of ICT, University of Medical Sciences, University of, and so forth. Is that right? What is the idea? Constituency project. They are at the state level, a government that have one or just only one university that they cannot fund, create 4 more. Those are some of the issues we talk with that I see ongoing, that we've not got anything. But we believe that if this agreement is signed and this issue addressed within the next 2 or 3 days, which will not take beyond 2 or 3 days, if we take this issue as an emergency.
Now, Prof, let me ask you this, Prof. Let me ask you, sorry to interject, let me ask you this. Because this is something that a lot of people just can't understand. So try to help us understand it now. Why Asuu is really bent on the use of UTAS in the payment of your salaries and not the IPs that is being used for other public servants. What exactly is the problem? Is there something about university lecturers now that the IP system does not capture?
You see, we have challenged this government, and our colleagues in the press use all available means to get the report of the Auditor General of the Federation in 2019 on IPs. The Auditor General came with a report that is with the National Assembly, with the Presidency. Let's get a copy of that document and publish it. You see the corruption in IPs. You see the inadequacies in IPs, not just in the university. The civil servants are not complaining because they don't have a body fighting for them. If you look at the police, look at it, they cannot complain. The same thing you have all over. The Polytechnic today are also saying the same things. And 2, Nigeria is paying so much of the money they say they don't have to a foreign company to just develop for them how to pay salary only. This is what we can do as academics, and we have done for them. That is foolproof. It has all the character. We make that is number 1 issue, that IPs on its own came in more than 18 years, 16 years ago. It has not been tested for once, and they have been defrauding money. As I speak to you, they told the whole world that they have paid all Nigerian university workers a consequential adjustment of minimum wage that was to be paid in 2019. As I speak, nobody has been paid a kobo in the University of Agriculture. In many other universities where they were paid, they were habitually paid. Many were not paid. That is the problem with IPs. 2, in a university, we have what we call autonomy of our universities. And the finances of the university ought to be managed by the governing council appointed by the visitor, who is the president, not Accountant General Office. That today, from the report about EFCC, alleging that the Accountant General has defrauded this country of hundreds of billions. That I told you what is happening in IPs, why people are suffering. And the idea of this autonomy is that if today a lecturer is underpaid in Usokoto, he has to take plane to come he has to join an airline to come to Abuja to come and say, I will resolve it, and spend days with his personal money. That would make the system inefficient. Then 3, it does not capture peculiarity of universities. University is a peculiar place. You have foreign lecturers that you teach in the university. You have foreign students. You have what they call sabbatical, visiting, and what have you. These are legitimate procedures that go to university. They are not captured in IPs. I will say it's not correct. I will challenge this government. I will also challenge again. Tell us one university in the whole world where salaries of lecturers are paid from Accountant General Office. That is no idea of a university. The university that is autonomous, that have vice chancellors, that have pro-chancellors, that have member of council, that have a qualified bursar, and that report every year to the budget office and National Assembly to check corruption. Now the corruption now is in Accountant General Office as alleged by EFCC, and you can see the because there's nobody controlling them. So that's why we are saying that the best option is let's use a homegrown produce. Nigeria will not pay 1 kobo. We will not pay anybody any percentage on 1 kobo. And let it be what we use around this country. And we have done a system that is far superior than this so-called IPs. And we believe as a country, we ought to be commended. The academics ought to be commended for this sacrifice we have used our members' check-off to do for the government as a gift to this government. We ought to be commended. Instead of struggling to pay our money hard currency to one company abroad.
All right. Now, you've been in the news as saying that the Minister of Labor has been like a cog in the wheel of progress in your negotiation. Now, the president has asked him to step aside. He's asked the Minister of Education to lead the negotiation and meet with you. What exactly was the problem you had with the Minister of Labor?
Well, we will start by commending the president for responding, having gotten the correct situation in the system. We commend the president for that. And we hope that the Minister of Education will follow in that direction and complete this in a short time. The Minister of Labor has been the one delaying these things. Self-aggrandizement. We started the strike. Instead of arresting that strike, they allowed the Minister of Education to take this. He took over the procedure against the rules, the ILO rules. He took over. And instead of solving the problem, what did he do? He believed that by stopping our salary, that is the best way to go, so that within 3 months we'll come and beg him to come back and destroy the system. And that was why he pushed for 5 months. This is the fifth month we have not been paid, because that was the idea. Use hunger weapon to deal with them, let them come back. And I can assure you, it happened to the medical people. And after the strike, you know what happened? You Nigerians saw it. They all ran away from the country. You were there. You saw it. As we speak today, now our lecturers are also going outside the country, brain drain, because of this action of using the weapon of hunger to see how you can recall people. Those are the problems we have in the system. So we commend the president for having changed. I can assure you, having changed to this Minister of Education, within a very short time, this issue will resolve. Because it's a minister who worked without looking for the press. The other one cannot do anything without calling the press. And the man is working, we will work with him silently. And when we are through, we inform the Nigerian public.
All right, we just hope this issue is resolved as soon as possible, because honestly, this has gone on for far too long. Professor Sedeke, thank you very much for talking to us. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. All right, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now, let's switch over to discuss economic matters now. The Central Bank of Nigeria has raised the monetary policy rate MPR from 13% to 14%. Now, this is the second time in 2 months the MPC will raise the interest rate. At the meeting in May, the committee adopted a hawkish stance now, joining the rest of the world to hike monetary policy rate. It went from 11.5% to 13% back then. But since then, inflation has moved up from 17.1% to 18.6% in June. Now, there's also the huge supply disruption occasioned by the ongoing war in Ukraine, which is fueling energy cost. According to the CBN Governor, Godwin Emefiele, the move is to curtail the rising trend of inflation in the country, which is currently at a 5-year high of 18.60%. While acknowledging that output growth remains fragile, the CBN boss maintained that not curtailing inflation at this time could erode the monetary gains achieved in improving consumer purchasing power. But the question is, what exactly are the implications of this decision? Joining me on the program now to discuss this further is Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. Dr. Muda, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Give me your take on the decision of the MPC.
Well, the decision of the MPC did not come as a surprise, given the current level of inflation and given what is happening around the world. But whether it is desirable or not is a different matter. Because for you to solve a problem, you must also identify the causes of the problem. The inflation phenomenon we are dealing with in the Nigerian economy are driven essentially by supply side factors. And what I mean by supply side factors are factors affecting the cost of production, cost of transportation, and general level of output in the economy. And these factors are not driven by monetary policy instruments. For instance, when you talk about energy costs, the cost of diesel has gone up by over 300% in the last 1 year or 6 months. That has significant implications for operating costs, for production costs, and for transportation costs. All of these costs will have to be transferred to the end user, to the final consumers. We have the same challenge with exchange rates. Exchange rate depreciation has been unprecedented. Over the last 1 year, we have seen a massive depreciation in the exchange rate. And when I'm talking about exchange rate, I'm talking about the parallel market rate. I say this because the parallel market rate has become essentially the default rate, default exchange rate in the Nigerian economy. Practically all economic decisions are hinged on that rate because majority of the players in the economy cannot access any significant amount of forex from the official window. So that has also been a major factor. Then we have factors that has to do with insecurity. Insecurity is a major driver of food inflation. Food inflation is a major component of the headline inflation. So that again is a major issue. It's not a monetary issue.
Yeah, but
then we have the components of the factors that relates to the CBN financing of deficits. That level of deficit financing by CBN has been growing astronomically. It's highly inflationary. So this is where we locate the key drivers of inflation.
Now, the CBN governor, the CBN governor did say he understands all these points that you have raised because these points actually came up during the question and answer session. He did admit that, look, he understands, but that, look, the CBN cannot, the Monetary Policy Committee cannot just sit down, fold its arms, and do nothing. That doing nothing, not taking this action, could even make things worse.
The point is that you don't do something just for the sake of doing something. At the last MPC before this, there was a hike in MPR. That is what put the MPR to 13%. All on the back of the fact that there are inflation concerns around inflation. What impact has that had on inflation? If anything, the inflationary situation has worsened. So we don't take an action just because that is what is happening in other economies. We don't take an action just because we want to do something. And in any case, the CBN has been doing a lot in trying to support the real sector of the economy in order to show up output through all these intervention funds, development finance initiatives.
And it says it will continue with those. What more can the CBN do? Yeah, I just said the CBN governor says the bank will continue with those efforts, those development finance initiatives.
Yes, which is good. I mean, that will help the supply side. But the fundamental drivers of inflation are these fiscal policy actions. I mean, issues affecting production and affecting transportation and affecting energy.
So
those are the critical things.
Yes. So what's the implication for you? What's the implication of this decision? What are we likely to see happen?
What we are likely to see happen is an increase in the cost of credit. First, for those who are currently indebted to the banks, because most of the terms of these loans are flexible. It's like a floating interest rate. These are interest rates that can be varied depending on the prevailing economic situation. So with the increase in MPR, all the economic players who are indebted to the banks will expect a hike in their lending rates. That is one major issue, and that one major implication. Then the other implication is that for those who are intending to get credit from the system, from the banking system, they are likely to pay more. And for all these economic players, they have enough troubles already. They have challenges with FX, they have challenges with energy, they have challenges with infrastructure, they have challenges with the ports, they have challenges with the fact that there is weak purchasing power. So how will they survive? It would have been understandable if this measure was going to impact inflation, but I'm not optimistic because the relationship between inflation and these monetary policy instruments are very weak, largely because there is very weak connection between the global economic activities generally in the economy and some of these interest rate policies. Because private sector credits as a percentage of GDP in Nigeria is less than, it's just about 15%. In a country like US, where there's a very strong link between credit and activities in the economy, the percentage is over 200%. In a country like South Africa, percentage of bank credits to private sector as a percentage of GDP is over 100%. So you can see that for some of these economies are credit driven. So if you want to deal with issues of demand or liquidity, you can easily adjust some of these policy instruments. But for a country like Nigeria, there is no strong connection because of financial inclusion problems. So when you begin to hike rates like this, it is only the few people that are relating with the banks, borrowing money from the banks or willing to borrow from the bank. Those are the people that will suffer. So we are going to see an increase in cost and possibly an increase in operating costs by those who are in business.
Well, just before we go, there's something else I actually want to get your take on. You must have watched the Minister of Finance when she was when she presented the MTEF, that's the medium-term expenditure framework now, in line with the preparation now for the budget of next year. Something actually came up and quite frightening. She painted a scenario where she said, look, if we were to continue the payment of petrol subsidy from now till next year, till the end of next year, essentially, the government would essentially have no revenue at all. There would be just nothing left for the government. And then she painted the revenue profile of the government and what the government was able to make between January to April, quite abysmal. The government did not meet its revenue target. Debt servicing, what we spent on debt servicing is even more than what we actually earned in the first 3 or 4 months of the year. And you look at this whole issue of subsidy. I mean, what will be your take on it? Because the government, of course, has a proposal on the table. What the government has on the table at the moment is that it will continue with the subsidy payment now until probably the middle of next year and then stop it altogether. But the question is, you look at the revenue profile of the government, you look at the projections and everything. Do you think the government can sustain the payment of this subsidy now until, say, the middle of next year? Because, I mean, paying it for the whole of next year, for me, it would be like suicide, if you like.
It's going to be extremely difficult. And what is clear from the beginning is that this whole regime of subsidy is not economically sustainable. But you must admit that there is a dilemma here. We are looking at the social consequences of completely removing the subsidy. We are looking at the political consequences of completely removing the subsidy. Given the situation with the citizens, given the level of poverty in the economy, and all of that. So it's like a catch-22 situation. But what we had expected is that the government had said that these refineries will be fixed. And we are beginning that we should begin to expect some outcomes by the end of this year. Either through the Dangote refinery or through the refineries of government that are being rehabilitated. That, for me, should have been placed on a very high priority, because that is the only window through which we can easily handle this situation. So it's a very difficult situation, if you ask me, but we should see what we can do with regard to these refineries and see if we can get them up and running, as government has promised. Because, quite frankly, the government is almost on the brink of bankruptcy. Because just as you said, already by April, debt service to revenue was over 100%. It's over 100. That means that the entire revenue that we make, our debt service cannot even cover it. So how do you now get revenue to fund personnel costs, to fund overhead, to fund capital expenditure, to deal with all these infrastructure problems, all these security problems? So it's an extremely frightening situation. And something has to be done urgently. There have to be maybe a new engagement around this subsidy to see how we can get some creative ways of dealing with it. And we also pray that perhaps if there is a reduction in crude oil price, because the level of subsidy is so high now because of the high crude oil price. So if it happens that we see some reduction in crude oil price and maybe some succor in this Ukraine-Russian crisis, perhaps the crude oil price may begin to come down, and that may reduce the pressure. It's a very difficult situation.
It's really an irony that Nigeria is now looking up to a reduction in the price of crude oil when we should actually be making a kill from the high prices now. It's a big irony.
It is an irony, and that is the price that we have to pay for the negligence over the years of getting a proper regulatory policy framework to ensure that we have investment in our oil and gas sector. This is a problem that we have lived with for over 2 decades. So it's a leadership failure, if you ask me, over those periods.
That's true. I mean, that's quite true, because it still doesn't make sense why our refineries have not worked all over these years. Dr. Muda Yusuf, thank you very much for joining us on the program, and thank you for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Well, that's how much we can take on the program this week. We thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.